Nvidia's new RTX 5070 laptop GPU is very similar to the RTX 4070 from last generation. So is the 5070 worth paying more for? I've compared both in 25 games at 1440p and 1080p resolutions to show you all the differences. Both the RTX 4070 and newer RTX 5070 laptop GPUs have the same amount of CUDA, Tensor, and RT cores. They both have 8 gigs of VRAM capacity with a 128-bit memory bus. But the 5070 uses faster GDDR7 memory, and there's a small difference in the power limits. On paper, the 4070 can run up to 140 watts with dynamic boost, but in the real world, it usually runs at more like 100 to 110 watts. And that reality is closer to the 5070's 115 watt limit. More power equals more performance. This graph shows the 3D Mark TimeSpy graphics score from each GPU at different power levels. And the 5070 in red was always outperforming the 4070 in purple with the same amount of power. The 5070 was scoring 11% better than the 4070, whether both were running at 115 watts in a bigger gaming laptop or at just 50 watts in a thinner and lighter laptop. But the 4070 is able to run with a bit more power. In this test, the 4070 tops out at 130 watts, meaning the 5070's lead lowers a little to just under 8% better. I'm using Lenovo's Legion 7i gaming laptops to do this testing, but if we find any good deals on any gaming laptops with either of these GPUs, we'll add them to our gaminglaptop.deals website. Save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. Unfortunately, the GPU is not the only difference between these two laptops. The 5070 is also paired with a newer processor and faster RAM, but honestly, in many cases, that's just the way it is. Newer GPUs are usually paired with newer hardware, so although not ideal for a perfect apples-to-apples GPU-only comparison, I think this will still do a good job of comparing what was available last gen with what's available this gen. The 4070 laptop in red used a little less power when measuring both at the wall with the charger connected. In 3 maxed out games at 1440p, the newer 5070 laptop was using 3 to 4% more power. Again, this isn't only due to the GPU difference. The 5070 does provide more FPS though, so from a performance per watt perspective, the 5070 in purple ends up more power efficient across these 3 games. The 5070 GPU was always running warmer than the 4070, despite both Legion 7i laptops having similar cooling designs. But again, the difference in processors would contribute to the heat, as both laptops have a heat pipe shared between the CPU and GPU. My 5070 was clocking higher in 2 of the 3 games, which makes sense as it has a higher max boost clock. These are the power levels being reached for each GPU in these games. While the 4070 claims it can do 140 watts, the reality is more like 100 to 130 watts depending on the game, while the 5070 was consistently running close to its 115 watt maximum in these 3 games. Let's get into the games, starting with Cyberpunk 2077. At 1080p, the RTX 5070 laptop was reaching a 12% higher average frame rate compared to the 4070, while the 5070 had a larger 19% lead at the higher 1440p resolution. Bigger differences at higher resolutions are usually expected, as the workload gets more GPU bound. Interestingly, both laptops start producing similar average FPS results if we turn on ray tracing and use DLSS upscaling. The newer 5070 laptop has fewer dips in performance though, as shown by its higher 1% lows, which basically just means the 5070 laptop is providing a more consistent, stable experience. Spider-Man 2 had the biggest differences seen out of all 25 games tested, with the 5070 laptop reaching a 30% higher average frame rate at 1080p and 21% higher at 1440p. Based on my experience, this game is usually more dependent on the CPU, so I suspect the newer processor paired with a 5070 is responsible for this above average difference. The difference isn't anywhere near as big with ray tracing enabled and DLSS upscaling. The 5070 still has a bigger lead at 1080p, again likely due to the CPU difference, but 1440p is very close. It's not all epic gains for the newer hardware though. Ghost of Tsushima had no real difference between the two laptops. Average FPS was basically the same, with the newer 5070 laptop having a slightly better 1% low result. Then some games like Red Dead Redemption 2 are just broken. The newer laptop was ahead at 1080p, as expected, but the older 4070 laptop was a fair bit ahead at 1440p. I've tested this game on many laptops and can definitely say there's some sort of bug or driver issue with Intel plus RTX 50 graphics, which lowers performance. But maybe this will change in a future update. Black Myth Wukong was still able to run above 60 FPS on the older 4070 laptop at 1080p high settings, but the newer 5070 laptop was reaching a 7% higher average frame rate, and it had a similar 7% lead at 1440p too, though you'd probably want to use some DLSS to boost performance. FPS actually improves a little with ray tracing and DLSS enabled, but the 5070 laptop was still 10% faster at 1440p. The Last of Us Part 2 was a little better with the 5070 laptop, with the exception of the 4070 being slightly ahead in 1% lows at 1440p. Still though, the 4070 is able to get us around 60 FPS at 1440p very high settings. The 5070 is only 9% faster in average FPS. Alan Wake 2 only had a minor 5% boost to average FPS at 1080p with the 5070, and a 7% boost at 1440p, though there's a much larger 26% lead in the 1% lows with the newer hardware at 1080p, but much of that could come down to the CPU difference rather than the GPU. The frame rates get a little higher with ray tracing enabled thanks to the help of DLSS. It's only an around average 8% lead. Instead of wasting your time individually talking through the rest of the 18 games tested, I'm just going to quickly skip through the rest of the results on screen now, so feel free to pause the video if you want to take a closer look at any specific game. The reason I test so many games is so that we can get a much more accurate average result from a wider selection of titles, which allows us to draw a better conclusion. In other words, more data equals more better. Let's take a look at the average differences next. On average, over all 25 games tested, at 1080p, the RTX 5070 laptop GPU was 9% faster compared to the RTX 4070 laptop GPU. Again, some of this difference will absolutely be due to the CPU and RAM differences we discussed earlier, but this is the sort of difference you can expect between a last-gen gaming laptop with 4070 graphics and a current-gen laptop with 5070 graphics. Stepping up to the higher 1440p resolution, and the 5070's lead lowers a little to being 7% faster than the 4070. I think these results do a better job of showing us the differences between the GPUs. Yeah, the CPU and RAM differences will still contribute, but the GPUs are more responsible for the differences as they start pushing more pixels. Here's how things look if we average the FPS from all 25 games together. This makes it really easy to see the differences. Ultimately, the 4070 laptop still gets us around 60 FPS at 1440p at higher setting levels. The 5070 is better, but not by much. Honestly, the 5070 feels more like a 4070 Ti. I suppose Nvidia would say a bigger difference is possible once you factor in multi-frame generation with the 5070, which is one of their biggest advertising points for the new 50 series. But I think they've overhyped it and used it to mislead people with dodgy marketing graphs. Only the newer RTX 50 series has access to the new multi-frame generation feature, which basically just means the 5070 can generate more AI frames than the 4070. Both laptops can use frame gen in the 2x mode, where one frame is generated for each real frame. But with multi-frame gen, the 5070 can also use 3x mode, where 2 frames are generated per one real frame, or the 4x mode, where 3 frames are generated per one real frame. Look, I think frame generation is a useful feature when used correctly, and according to this investigation by Tim from Hardware Unboxed, that includes single-player games that aren't latency sensitive, with a base frame rate of 70 to 80 FPS prior to generating frames, which we can achieve in many games with this level of hardware. And most of the games that I personally play fall into that bucket. So when I play games on my own computer, yeah, I turn frame generation on and and I don't think about it. For me, it offers a better, smoother experience compared to not using it. But at the end of the day, it's simply not fair to try and do an apples-to-apples comparison between AI-generated frames and regular rasterized frames, and pretend that the two are equal and that the AI-generated frames is offering an FPS boost. The visual quality and latency aren't the same. The 4070 can still use the standard 2x frame generation if you really want to generate AI frames. I don't think that multi-frame gen is a must-have feature from the 5070. It's more of an optional nice-to-have extra if you've got it available. What will be more likely to affect your choice between these two GPUs is the price. Now, prices will of course change over time, so check those links below the video for updates and to see if there are any current sales. Because if gaming laptops with either of these GPUs do have a good sale, we'll add them to our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that every day to include all the best sales. So make sure you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. Right now, in early September, it's difficult to buy an RTX 4070 laptop at a good price. It's as if either Nvidia are making fewer 4070 GPU dies in favor of the newer 5070, or laptop brands simply aren't making as much new stock with 40 series. This results in 5070 laptops often being cheaper compared to the 4070 it replaces. But of course, it depends on the specific laptop and the other specs that it offers. The cheapest 4070 deal we've had on the gaminglaptop.deals site so far was for $850, with $900 being more common for an entry-level option, and $1,400 getting you something more premium. So far, the cheapest 5070 deal we've listed on the site was $1,100 for an Omen 17, but $1,300 to $1,400 is more typical for a solid mid-range option. There's not that much difference from a cost per frame perspective. A 4070 laptop at $1,100 offers similar value to a 5070 laptop at $1,200. Though, as we saw, that extra $100 only gets you 7% more FPS on average at 1440p. And generally speaking, 5070 laptops are more expensive. If you're buying now, the 5070 kinda wins by default, as prices of the 4070 continue to go up due to a lack of supply. But the 4070 isn't too far in performance compared to the 5070 if you do find it on a good sale, and you don't care so much about multi-frame generation. As for both GPUs having just 8 gigs of VRAM, that can definitely be a limit for 1440p gaming. The last thing you want to do when spending thousands of dollars on a new gaming laptop is make a mistake and get stuck with something you'll have to use for the next few years. Which is why I recently worked with Steve from Hardware Unboxed to show the VRAM limits in gaming laptops. So check that one out next before you buy.